This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. Emotions are so important in our lives. It pretty much governs everything we do, decisions we make. It all comes back to our emotions. And also, riding along with that is energy. Two words that start with E that can greatly impact your life, whether you realize it or not. We're going to dig deep into that today with a registered naturopathic doctor. She offers so many different services to help move your life forward and understand a lot of this stuff. And I get it. I understand something. It can be a little woo, if you will. But once you start understanding it, light bulbs go off and you have epiphanies and you realize why you do what you do and how energy is basically controlling us for better or worse, essentially, and also our emotions. Dr. Laura Brown is back with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Steve. How are you doing?
Terrific. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about. It really is.
It's very interesting. We'll talk first about energy and then kind of how emotions fit into that because you often hear people saying, "Oh, I've got such little energy. I've so low energy. I've got fatigue," and they just don't know where it's coming from. And to date, we've talked a lot about, diet and the microbiome. We talked about nutrient deficiencies, and all of these things can play into low energy because, everything in the world is energy, and we must take in a form of energy in order to have energy. And it's kind of a no-brainer. It's not really woo at all. It's pretty scientific and pretty basic.
It really is. That what was his name? Another E name or something that starts with the Einstein was talking about this
Hmm.
energy thing years ago, and many were not listening. But as you said, scientifically proven, we can see the proof of how everything is energy. Us, the pen you're holding, the chair you're sitting in, everything, and it can really change your life once you figure out how to work with it.
Yeah, it really does. There's certain things that can definitely impact, as we've talked about diet. We know that sleep can impact it, exercise can impact it, and depending on what's going on there. I mean, if we just had that time change, and that just seems to really disrupt things. It disrupts our circadian rhythm, and when we have to just move the clock forward or back an hour, and you think, oh, it's just an hour, it shouldn't bother us, but it really tends to mess with our systems. And not only do we have a circadian rhythm in how we live our life and work through things, the bugs in our gut also have a circadian rhythm. So we get a little off kilter, and it's very valid. And we don't get as good a night's sleep, which is, very valid until we can reestablish, a new norm in that circadian rhythm. So, a good night's sleep is essential for energy. There's many reasons why we wouldn't sleep. As naturopathic doctors, it's one of the key things that we're talking about because if we're not sleeping, not much else is happening.
Mm.
Sleep is, yeah, sleep is not inactive. It is a very active state of rejuvenation, and your body is
Yeah.
basically shutting you down because it's got work to do.
It's it's repairing itself, and many of us will eat late or have a snack, which, as I understand it, is counterproductive because your body doesn't want to digest; it wants to do its job. Now you're forcing it to do another job that it shouldn't be doing at that time, right?
It's so funny you put it that way because if you were to, shrink yourself down and become one of your little microbes down there in your gastrointestinal tract, you'd probably have a lot to say and about your habits and routines and what you're putting down there, what you're feeding it.
Mm.
It'd probably have much feedback to give you. So if you can imagine yourself there and imagine what it might appreciate. It's really difficult to look after, the repair and maintenance of a house. Just think of a simple task of washing a floor. You
Yeah.
want to wash a floor. Do you really want somebody walking through at the same time with muddy boots?
No.
No. Okay, so that's kind of like your example of do you really want to have food down there that needs to be digested when the body's really wanting to go into that nighttime repair mode? So this is really important for, as a part of our rejuvenation and to help make us, feel refreshed in the morning. Big part of detoxification happening in these hours through the different organs. There's lots of activity going on that's very important to restore us and to repair us so that we wake refreshed and have good energy. And if we're not sleeping, we have to figure out why. There's different reasons why we might not be sleeping. It can be pain, so we need to address pain. It can be, eating too late at night or eating the wrong foods. It can be alcohol. When we consume alcohol in small quantities, the body can detoxify it, and it can actually be medicinal in small quantities. But we're talking small. When we're getting, an amount that the body's having to now really focus, namely the liver, having to focus processing, it's going to prioritize because alcohol is a toxin and it needs to detoxify it. And if it's busy detoxifying it, it's not going to do too much of anything else because it's prioritizing getting the toxin out of your system. So this is often where you might wake up hungry, in the middle of the night or after you've had a few drinks, you're like, why am I so hungry? You get the munchies, that kind
Mm.
of thing. Well, the liver's so busy processing the toxins, and the liver's also responsible for storing sugar. We talked about this last week, that fructose getting, directly into the liver, building up, making that fatty liver. But it's storing up other energies, for glucose generation. The liver is a storage for the glucose. And so when the blood sugar starts to go down, after you've had a meal, after a while, the whole role of the liver in that regard is to provide on demand, you know, sugar to go into the bloodstream to keep our energy consistent so that it can do its tasks. It can do all the things that it needs to do to repair or needs to do to move if it's through the day. And if the liver is busy processing the alcohol, it's like its hands are tied behind its back and it's being asked to, well, it's, you know, consumed with processing these toxins that, and it might not just be alcohol, it could be other things too, right? It could be environmental toxins. I'm using alcohol as an example. But the liver's so busy there and the bloodstream's going, hey, we got low blood sugar here. We need some more, please. It's going, I'm so busy detoxifying. You're gonna have to wait. I'm sorry. So then the alarms go up that say, I'm hungry. So then you're, out to the fridge looking to see what's to eat because you're not getting, the natural function of the liver to help stabilize the blood sugar. So you end up with those crashes of energy and you're over consuming food unnecessarily. And this is a whole imbalance of energy because the body has safely tucked away, the sugars for later in order to draw on them, and now it's not drawing on them. So now they just sit there. And this is why the liver becomes fatty, and this is why we get dysregulation in our blood sugars. And then this is why long term it might need to lead to something like type 2 diabetes.
So when we say I'm low on energy, I'm low on energy, we're identifying some of these things here that can attribute to us saying that. How do you connect that to the other aspect of energy? And they're probably closely connected, but the fact that everything is energy. So when somebody's saying, I feel just depleted, I'm low on energy, how do you make that correlation between the two energy references, if you will?
Okay, so when you're talking about emotional energy,
Um, well, I'm talking about energy in general, however, everything is energy. And then
hmm
when somebody says, I feel low on energy, would there be, are they, we two separate things that we're talking about here?
there's different types of energy,
Okay,
right? So it's digging into why we might have, low energy. And, we talked about, okay, is it sleep? Are we trying to detoxify? So we've talked about those two things. What
sure.
are we consuming? We talked before about if our food isn't fresh and vibrant, we're probably not either.
Mm,
Um, there's a whole other thing with like caffeine because we have an addiction to caffeine as well as our addiction to sugar in our North American environment. And caffeine has a 5-hour half-life. So if you're pumping yourself full of caffeine, you just try to stay awake and then it's still processing through your system in the nighttime. You're not sleeping well. So then you have a cup of coffee in the morning to kind of wake up. And it's just this rat race treadmill that you get on that it really is just the caffeine's not getting processed, and that's why you're not getting a good night's sleep, can be contributing to it. So it's reducing the caffeine or eliminating it if possible, or
Sure.
making sure that what we have is first thing in the morning, is, a decent amount that's not overdoing it, and not doing anything past maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, and definitely not afternoon, because it's going to take the time. And caffeine comes in coffee and tea and chocolate and energy drinks and all these things that are just this rat race of negative vortex that just sucks us in to sucking us from energy. So there's those things. And then you're talking about, oh, I'm feeling low in energy, which can be like an energetic thing where somebody is actually there's a leak in your energy somehow, or an energy drain in your environment. And this can
Mm.
come from electromagnetic fields. I just saw that there is a huge electromagnetic solar storm happening tonight and tomorrow. And this, you think, oh, this is one of those woo-woo things. But no, it affects satellite connections, it affects internet. Okay, it's also affecting you. You're an electric body, so it's also affecting you. And you're an electric body in the sense of how your sodium and how your potassium and how your nervous system works. And they've even shown through blood work reports that your red and white blood cells are affected by these solar storms. So your immune system is affected by
For
these
anybody
solar
that
storms.
says, "Oh, come on, guys, what are you talking about?" Look at the full moon last night.
Yeah.
Talk to any medical professional, EMT, first responder, hospital worker. They'll tell you firsthand that things get a little wonky weird during a full moon. Why would that be? It's the moon is powerful, like the other planets, like the energy storm that you're talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there's like emotional energy that we carry around. Emotions are energy in motion. They're supposed to be in motion. But if we
Hmm.
don't process them, they get stuck in us. And when emotions get stuck in us, then that causes dis-ease. And over time, it can cause inflammation or inappropriate the body is amazingly adaptive. So inappropriate adaptations in order to keep us alive. Okay. And for instance, the HeartMath Institute, heartmath.org, they've been doing research on the science of the heart since the early 1990s. And you can see how through their research, you can see how each emotion is tied to a signature frequency. So our emotions have frequencies, and these frequencies can affect us. And we can actually entrain if we entrain ourselves with somebody with positive energy or positive emotions, we are actually entraining or matching their waveform or emotional quotient of energy. Okay. And this can happen if somebody has very positive vibes, so to speak, or negative vibes, so to speak. It's not woo, it's scientific, it's measured in frequency,
Yep.
it's measured in intensity, and we can see this and we can feel it and sense it. And the heart, especially, is an organ, it senses and feels everything. If we take a look through Chinese medicine, there's different organs that process different emotions. And when you look at how things flow, and this is what I talk a lot about in my Root to Crown course, is energy and how it flows through our energy centers and our hormones and how it relates to our nervous system. It takes kind of the woo out of the chakra system and explains some things in a scientific, evidence-based format. Okay, so there's some things there, and I talk about, light as healing because we're using lasers, right? We
Yeah.
use
Oh,
lasers, right? We're
red
using
light therapy been around for quite some time now.
quite some time. They're doing green light therapy for different cognitive things. They're doing yellow light therapy. We're doing using lasers on the skin to do stuff, right? So we have energy from the form of light that can come into our bodies, whether that's blue light that affects our sleep, that prevents our melatonin from being released, or the fluorescent lighting that you might have overhead at work that is affecting your energy. These things have a frequency. Your body's picking up on it. That saps and drains energy.
Mm.
So, we know that the sun is very restorative on the skin. It helps us produce vitamin D, and that gives us energy.
You mentioned melatonin. Did you see the
Mhm.
study or report that came out a few days ago how melatonin can be connected to heart attacks?
I didn't see the study. No, what did it say?
I got to dig deeper into it, but basically, it's saying don't cut back on melatonin if you're taking it to sleep, but just be careful. But I don't know why it causes or could cause heart attacks. I mean, I just read this. I think it was either this morning or last night. And you
I'll
just
take a
mentioned
stab
melatonin.
at it.
Yeah, take a
Yeah, I'll
look.
take a stab at that. I'll take a look at it, but my guess is melatonin is so they have melatonin that's released in the gut 400 times more than the brain, and that's used a lot for regenerating the gut cells. The gut cells are that lining's turning over every 3 to 5 days. So that's probably why a lot of it is down there. There's other reasons too, but I won't get into it. And then we got the melatonin that comes out of the pineal gland in the brain. And this one is sensitive to light. And that's light coming in through our eyes. And that's why this time of year we might feel a little tired because we're not getting as much daylight and our circadian rhythms are having to adjust to these darker hours so we can feel a little groggy. We feel more energized on a sunny day versus a cloudy day, whether we're inside or not. Then we have melatonin that's made in almost every mitochondria in the cell, and the heart is a huge muscle that's always pumping, and that would be using mitochondria in those cells, and it acts as, or sorry, the melatonin is acting as an antioxidant, and it's doing other functions within the mitochondria to help create energy. Mitochondria are little little parts of our cells that make energy. These things make energy, and the heart is always pumping. It's a important muscle that's always working. So of course it's going to be using things like melatonin, CoQ10, and all these things that are really good for energy building, right?
So I just looked it up in USA Today. So I was cautious that it might be clickbait, some crazy story. But essentially, it's not about the link between melatonin and and heart disease, but it's a study presented at the American Heart Association scientific sessions saying a notable link between consistent melatonin supplement use and an increased risk of heart failure. 100,000 adults diagnosed with insomnia, those who regularly use melatonin had a 90% higher chance of developing heart failure over a 5 year period compared to non-users. And what I think it's saying here is really the connection between sleep and heart issues. Because if you can't sleep, you might be taking melatonin. So that's the connection.
Mm.
I don't believe it's
That's
an actual connection between the chemical and heart failure.
It's an interesting one because you have to be careful of the confounders when you have studies come out like this. It's like, okay, we have, and the confounding factors could be you have sleep issues. This could lead to heart issues, and they've already linked that.
Yes.
Those with sleep apnea usually end up with a higher risk factor of atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heartbeat. Okay. And if this is the case, and we're not using a pressurized CPAP, they call it, for, the mask that helps
Yep.
pressurize to sleep, that can, you could be having sleep apnea, not realizing it, feeling like you're not sleeping well, not waking up rested in the morning, and then you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll take a melatonin and see if that helps. So it may not be the melatonin that's causing the issue. Maybe there is something there. We'd
Mm.
have to dig into that.
Yep.
And I'll talk about supplemental melatonin in a second. But it could be the other confounding factors like the sleep apnea and the risk of AFib, because when you have sleep apnea, you stop breathing in the night, and then your alarm system and your brain goes off and says, wake up, you got to breathe. And then of course, whoosh, the whole system comes up and the heart starts to go, and then it ends up developing this irregular pattern of fight or flight, and then it just starts going off on its own, which is kind of the AFib. Now melatonin, they've shown that it's so much better to get the melatonin out of your food if you can. There's foods that you
Hmm.
can take in, There's posts on my website that talk about the different foods, but for an example, a handful of pistachios could be helpful. For
Wow.
example, as foods that could help you consume the building blocks for your body to make its own melatonin. And then it's staying away from screens, some of those things like that, so that your body can, naturally adapt to the change in light before you go to bed, so that it can start winding down and knows that, oh, it's time to make melatonin, right? So there's this is what naturopaths do. We look at how do we do this naturally so that we're not always even supplements. I always like to look, is there something lifestyle or diet we can do? Because those are things we do every day that we can correct or we can incorporate, right? Without having to buy another pill or take another pill. Because there's something like pill fatigue that we all hear about, and there's only so many things you can take a pill for. So what can we do that helps correct the root cause of it and then go from there? So it's not always deemed appropriate to take a melatonin supplement. It might be more appropriate to look at our food base.
So I've heard that if you take melatonin or too much of it, it's going to really radically mess with the process of melatonin in your body and decrease your normal melatonin because now you're taking a supplement. And I'm not sure how this works, but telling your body up, yeah, I don't have to, you don't have to manufacture it anymore because we got it here with the supplement. It's not a good thing after a period of time or a certain amount after, if you take a larger amount. What are your thoughts there?
Like any hormone, and melatonin is a hormone, there's a feedback loop in the body. The body has intricate mechanisms of balance. You never want too much of a hormone, you never want too little of a hormone. And so this feedback loop works, and it's much like a thermostat. You turn the thermostat up, you're telling the furnace to make more heat. Okay. And then once it reaches a certain temperature, the furnace turns off until the temperature drops again. And then the thermostat says, "Hey, it's a little cool in here. Can you make more heat?" So we have those internal mechanisms that do it for estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, because cortisol is part of our circadian rhythm, melatonin, which is part of our circadian rhythm. Um, so there's all of those types of things that if we to take something exogenously or like as a supplement, and if you take too much too long, then it can make the body lazy. You can be like, oh, I don't need to do anything. She's taking it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this can happen. So if the body is capable of making its own, given it has the appropriate building blocks, let it do its own thing, right? And they often say melatonin is best, taken for periods of like 6 to 8 weeks just to retrain the body or for a short period of time to help get over a jet lag or something like that. It's not, it's often not meant to be taken daily unless you're using it for, say, tumor reduction, breast cancer, for example.
Wow.
We use higher doses in breast cancer as tumor reduction. Or as you age, your pineal gland tends to calcify. They're not sure really why it calcifies. There's a lot of different opinions, but not a lot of evidence. So sometimes as we get older on in years, maybe it would be something that would help in smaller amounts longer term. But that's between you and your doctor to figure out. It's not something that you should just throw into your pill bottle without speaking to somebody, because these things do interact. And as you said, they can be detrimental taken long term.
So just about out of time, what would you say is the optimum amount of melatonin? Everybody is different, every situation is different, but if you're going to take it, usually it comes in 5 and 10 milligrams.
I'm not going to give medical advice here, Steve.
Sure.
We see that melatonin can come in as small as amounts as half a milligram. And
Mm.
you need to work with your doctor to figure out what is the right amount for you. We're dealing with hormones, and tiny little bits of hormones can make big differences. More is not always better. Again, hormones have a Goldilocks zone, and we want the just right. So it's working with your medical practitioner to figure out why you might need it, if you do, or can you just take the building blocks out of your food? And if you do need the supplement, how much, when you should take it, and for how long is something that needs to be discussed in an individual medical appointment.
What you said there, obviously, you need to check with your medical practitioner, but even what you said in terms of more is not always better. Many of us like, I need to get to sleep. Hit me up with the 10. I'm taking the 10 right now. Maybe not the best idea. And you mentioned before consumption of alcohol in smaller amounts may be beneficial. Um, in your estimation, again, everybody's different, everybody's body weight is different. What would you say a small amount would be?
Well, if you're talking about some of the research studies that they've done in heart health, they say like a 5 to 6 ounce glass. I mean, there's so many different studies, and I think there's a lot of
Right?
opinions behind them. They say like a 5 to 6 ounce glass, every 2 weeks in some of them. Some of them is like, once a week. Some of them are, so there's so many different ones out there. And I think why we have so it's so difficult to do the research on it. It's like what is that person eating when they're drinking? Number one, how much are they drinking? How healthy is their liver? How do their enzymes process? Because we know females don't have the same capacity to process alcohol as men do. That's why it's almost half the dose for females to males.
Hmm.
And then we know that there are some genetic components. There's some certain genetic cultural streams that can't process alcohol at all. They don't do well with it. They just don't have the enzyme. So it is again a little bit individual in that regards. And there's in the last couple of years a lot of research coming out saying any amount of alcohol can cause cancer.
Sure.
So it's
That
it's
one
it's
actually most recently and big study to the point where warning labels on Surgeon General recommending warning labels on all bottles of alcohol, no matter what it is. Um, so much great insight, and I love how Laura you can deliver it in a short period of time. Many nuggets here that are so important. What's your website if somebody wants to work with you on whatever level, or just even if they have a question? How do they find you?
It's drlauramBrown.com. So DRLAURA, M as a Marie, BROWN.com.
Thank you for these podcasts. Thank you for the insight and what you do. You run deep, and it's a beautiful thing. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the